Les interviews du doc, c'est maintenant sur Vinyl Time.
Bon bah voilà les amis, c'est un grand plaisir une nouvelle fois qu'on va pouvoir échanger avec Monsieur Joe Stump, voilà, qui vient nous provire ce Joe Stump Tower of Babel. Voilà, l'album est sorti, il s'appelle Days of Thunder. Il est sorti depuis le 4 juillet sur Silver Lightning Records. C'est un grand plaisir une nouvelle fois d'échanger avec Joey. Joey, thank you so much again for accepting my invitation. It's a great pleasure to speak right now with a new Tower of Babel coming with a lot of good songs on it. And I think since the beginning of July, you are totally happy because you have a new baby right now, live. And a lot of people maybe discover the sounds, the music of Joe Stump in Tower of Babel. So what is your feeling right now, a couple of days after this release with turning for a lot of people?
Well, I mean, it's a really strong record, and exactly, you never know, who's going, what fans you're going to get. It's like I've been making records and doing things a long time, but you never know. It could be, could be this record that all of a sudden somebody that's never heard of me before or familiar with my work, all of a sudden discovers me through this record, which is not a bad thing. You know what I mean? That's all. I'm nice with, I'm cool whether it's somebody that's been a fan of mine for years or or new fans or whatever. You know what I mean? I don't discriminate. I'm grateful. I'm grateful one way or the other.
Bah voilà, vous l'avez compris les amis, alors on va découvrir donc ce Tower of Babel, Joe Stump, Day of Thunder. Alors, comme le dit Joey, l'album est disponible depuis le 4 juillet, alors il y a certainement plein de gens qui vont découvrir sa musique. Comme il est dit, il attend d'avoir effectivement des anciens, des nouveaux, plein de gens qui vont découvrir pour le coup ni plus ni moins que son nouvel album. Et puis moi je vous le dis, il y a plein d'amis, on va en parler. Il y a des gens fantastiques qui jouent sur cet album. On va en parler bien sûr avec Joey parce que on a pas mal d'amis sur cet album donc l'album fait 10 titres et c'est un grand moment de pouvoir expliquer, de parler de ça avec Joey. I think we have a lot of people maybe discover Tower of Babel right now. Maybe we have just through word because it is the second Tower of Babel. And of course, the point is maybe we can just speak a little bit about the beginning of Tower of Babel because you have the second one who is coming right now. And the first one coming on 2017, if I remember, 5 years ago, maybe 8 years ago now, so it's very long. And maybe a lot of people discover this new band because clearly we have to speak about two different bands. The first release, this is one band with you, and now you are more with a friend, and it's clearly a new beginning for this project now.
Yes, well, the band was first formed. I was working with this singer Chaba Svekin, and I had worked with him in a couple different things, like this one metal band Raven Lord. We did some a small run of shows, a couple shows in the UK, and then a few festivals. And then I was working with him in this other band, Exorcism. He had another project. He asked me if I wanted to do it. That was more of like a kind of doom metalish, kind of like Tony Martin era Sabbath. And then I had this Tower of Babel thing, and I was like, hey, you want to sing with me on this? And he's actually the one that found all the players. He found Nick and Maestro Mysteri and Mark Craw. He brought all the other players on board, and then we did Lake of Fire. And then what he did was he stole, I wrote all the music, he wrote the lyrics and the melody lines. He registered all the publishing under his name, stole all the publishing, and then for some reason we had a falling out after the record was out, maybe a year and a half, and then he proceeded to try to get the record taken down off of all the platforms. And then, we split with him. He was kind of, I don't know if he had like some issues mentally or what was going on. But but as I often say, problem with a singer, big surprise. You know what I mean? Who would have thought that would happen? Pretty much now I know why I do instrumental records. But anyway, I'll keep it short because I know you got to translate. But then that record was down for a while,
Mhm.
and then by the time we found Joe Amori, we found him through Maestro Mysteria. The maestro is Joe had sang on the Vivaldi Metal Project,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and then Maestro Mysterio was like, "Hey, how about this guy for Tower of Babel?" And Joe was singing like he sent me a video of Joe singing some Dio stuff, and I was like, "Okay, I'm sold," and then it kind of went from there. But I'll kind of stop there that way because if you need to translate.
Ah.
Yeah,
T'inquiète.
like if I'm speaking and you ever need to
Oh,
translate
it's
because
okay,
you
it's okay.
want to shorten it
It's
up, you
okay.
just let me know.
It's okay, it's okay. So voilà, vous l'avez l'histoire. Donc le premier album était sorti en 2017. Donc il y avait tout un groupe autour de Joey avec un chanteur et puis qui jouait dans Ravenlord. Et puis voilà, l'idée c'était que derrière, bah, il y avait déjà Mark Ross, Mysteria qui jouait déjà là. Et puis l'album est sorti, puis ils savent pas trop ce qui s'est passé. Bah, le chanteur a pété un boulon, voilà, ni plus ni moins. Et donc tout est sorti au nom de ce chanteur. Et puis derrière, ils ont dû attendre et il s'est dit bon bah voilà, on va attendre. Et dans le laps de temps, donc avec Mysteria et puis avec Mark Ross. Maestro, ils ont découvert la voix de Joey Amor donc ils ont partagé une vidéo Joey a partagé une vidéo et puis ils ont regardé cette vidéo en disant waouh, il chante comme Dio et Joey a dit ouais bah voilà, c'est parti. C'est le chanteur. Joey, right now we have to speak about this new band because of course we're speaking about Joey, we're speaking about Mysteria, we have Mark Cross who is playing on drums and Nic Angileri who is playing bass. Mark made a lot of work on this record because he's working a lot on recording and so on. What is the chemistry between you and Mark? Because of course you have to provide a lot of different stuff and music and so on. But Mark produce and make a lot of mixed and mastering. No, he produce, he's mix, and it's a lot of work.
Oh yeah, well Mark does a tremendous amount of stuff for the band. You know what I mean? He really you know what I mean? I mean he takes care of like as far as the record goes. Joe had flown over to Greece and Mark, work. So Joe recorded all the vocals with Mark in Mark's studio. So Mark really helped Joe, like, and helped produce the vocal tracks. Plus, Mark also helped Joe, Mark also, wrote, collaborated with Joe and wrote a bunch of the melody lines with Joe and like a bunch of the lyrics with Joe as well. So Mark had a big part in that, and then Mark had a friend that was an engineer, and he said, "Hey, my friend, there's a friend of mine in Greece. He has a studio. We could mix the whole record analog. It would sound killer for this kind of record. What do you think?" And everybody in the band was like, "Well, have the guy mix a track, and then we'll listen to it, and then we'll see." So the guy mixed a track. It came out quite good. And then we decided to do it at the studio in Greece, and Mark would, of course Mark was the only one there, so he was overseeing the mix. He would send all the mixes to us, and then everybody in the band would like add what they wanted tweaked and stuff like that. And they would have, and since it was analog, they would have to remix it, and so sometimes like they'd have to mix tracks several times before like they got the finished product. And so Mark had a big hand in like the production of the record because he was right there in the studio the whole time that they were mixing it. And even though everybody in the band was commenting on the mix, but Mark was really hands on. And then it was Mark's connection. He's good friends with, I forget the gentleman's name, but the who mastered the record. But he masters all the Maiden stuff.
George Absoptis. George Absoptis, yeah.
Yeah, like so he's Mark is friendly with him, so he obviously didn't charge us what he charges Iron Maiden, so we managed to get the record mixed for like a quite a nice like a good price as well. So in addition to all that, Mark also helps out. Like Mark had a big hand in the artwork of the record too. Like we had Jobert Mello, from Sledgehammer Graphics. Jobert's done like he's done my last two covers,
Yeah.
my solo records and stuff. And so Mark was working, kind of working with him, kind of collaborating with him on on some of the things. He was very specific about the artwork. Because I'm more involved with the music, and I'm like, does the cover art look badass and cool? Nice, okay, I'm going with it. But I like me, I don't get quite as involved in it. And Mark also helps out quite a bit with like all the band's website, and the Facebook page and a lot of social media stuff. So he's like really it does so much for the band and stuff. So it's really nice. Everybody contributes quite a bit, and everybody's got their roles within the band. So it seems to be working out nicely.
Bah voilà, vous l'avez compris. Alors, on parlait effectivement de l'équipe, hein, mais surtout de Mark Cross, qui est le batteur, qui fait les backing vocals. Comme le dit Joey, Mark, il s'est beaucoup investi dans le groupe, parce il a fait effectivement, il a mixé avec George Aptiotis en Grèce, et puis il a aussi travaillé sur la production. Mark s'occupe aussi du website, du site internet, de la page Facebook. Et comme le dit très bien Joey, lui, il est plus là pour enregistrer des choses. Mais il préfère avoir quelqu'un d'autre qui s'occupe de ça. Ça a été enregistré donc au studio Aptiotis en Grèce. Comme ils le disent, ils ont fait un bon prix pour le faire. Et puis derrière, donc la voix de Joe Amore a été enregistrée chez Mark, justement dans son studio pour pouvoir avoir quelque chose de plus frais. Et puis ils ont enregistré et fait une production assez rapide. Et puis ils ont tous été contents de ce disque. Joey, one thing, you on this band you have a lot of different way, because you are playing on many bands. What is the most difficult to create this Day of Thunders? Because of course you playing with Alcatraz, you playing sometime alone, Joey playing in another band, Mysteria playing of course in these different bands, plus Bruce Dickinson. So that was so I'm pretty sure so difficult to have everybody at the same page at one moment to create this one. What was the most difficult on this record?
Well, now, with Alcatraz and with Tower of Babel, now it's like sadly no one, no one's in the room playing together when they're making a record anymore. You know what I mean? I'm sure the guys in Maiden can do that, and the guys in Metallica can do that, and some of the bigger bands with larger record budgets. But I had written a bunch of the stuff and recorded a bunch of it quite a while ago, a few years ago, right around the time I was making Diabolical Ferocity, my last solo record. That I recorded a lot of the a lot of the Tower of Babel record, and it just through finding Joe Amore, and then also through everybody finally recording all their parts, and also like Joe flying over to Mark's studio in Greece, and Mark also, he had to get his whole studio set. Mark had moved from Germany to Greece, so he had to set up his whole studio, and it took him a little bit of time to get that up and running so he could record the drums. So that's probably one of the reasons it took a while for the record to finally all come together like that. And then also once we had the record finished, finding the proper home with it, which really worked out nicely, like signing to Silver Lining. So in the end, it all worked out, but it was a bit of a lengthy process. Hence the difference. Why so long in between, from now to from the first record? But with the difficulties with the previous singer, and and logistically everything that was going on, it took a while.
Voilà, vous l'avez compris. Alors, comme il le dit, donc il avait déjà des idées qui traînaient depuis un moment sur l'album, même sur son solo album d'avant. Et puis l'idée, c'était de pouvoir mettre tout le monde en même temps sur la même page. Voilà, donc ils ont réussi, et en tout cas, ils ont fait un superbe album. One of the better songs, I think, one of my favorite on this album, it's Alone in the Desert. I like this song. I listened multiple times this song. What is behind this song, Joey? Alone in the Desert. Are you really alone in the desert?
I am definitely not alone in the desert. You know what I mean? Look at me. Look at me. Do I look like I'm dressed for the desert?
Yeah.
Exactly. I'm not going. Exactly. You know what? You know where I am? I'm alone in a nice air-conditioned hotel. That's where I'm alone. You know, with a drink in my hand. You know, I'm not alone in the desert. It's hot. But what was I going to say? But yeah, no, I wrote all the music for Alone in the Desert, and you know, Joe and Mark helped him as well. But Joe wrote the melody line and everything, and it's a very cool track because it's got that main riff, which is kind of like very '70s kind of rainbow, you know, and then it goes into like that verse part with the stop time thing that almost kind of reminds you of like, even though they're not an influence on me, almost reminds you of like a White Snake-ish kind of thing on the verse. You know what I mean? But that, you know, with that stop time thing and and the vocal, but then it goes into the eastern section, and of course the eastern section, you know, what is that? That's pure like Blackmore. That's pure like Stargazer, Gates of Babylon action, you know. And you know, so Stargazer, so you know, Alone in the Desert. What is it? Yeah, it's like one of those epic Eastern tracks, like Stargazer or Gates of Babylon. Does it sound too much like either of those? No, but it's got elements of both of those, and it's got a little bit of that '70s kind of, you know, even though they're not an influence on me, but of course the, you know, tremendous, you know, of course it's got almost like that, you know, a little bit of a Zeppelin kind of, you know, rainbow purple Zeppelin kind of thing in some of the parts.
Voilà, vous l'avez compris, alors on discutait sur un des morceaux que j'adore de l'album qui s'appelle Alone in the Desert. Alors je disais à Joey, était vraiment tout seul dans le désert. Il me dit non, il est habillé avec sa chemise, avec ses chaussures, il n'est pas tout seul dans le désert. Voilà, l'idée c'était juste effectivement que c'est un très bon titre. Si vous aimez les morceaux comme Gates of Babylon, Stargazer, vous allez y retrouver plein de choses. Ça sent, ça ressemble à du Whitesnake aussi. Ce morceau, il est vraiment très bien fait. C'est un vrai clin d'œil, un bel héritage à toute la musique de Rambo, de Deep Purple, voilà, des grands avec bien sûr ce petit côté Led Zeppelin qui est hyper important. Uh, Mark, Joey, I would like to say that this record um, it's a real thinking about some really great band like Rainbow, like Ritchie Blackmore, like Dio and some other on, but with a fresh approach of 2025. It looks like not something with a copy paste of this old period of this 70s and so on, but this one is look like so fresh right now. So I like each moment of this album. We came the idea to make a mix between your love for this Ritchie, for the Rainbow, and for other stuff, and put some fresh of this 2025 because, of course, you cannot copy the band like Rainbow for sure, and clearly it is real issue each time when you're coming back with something with around Ritchie Blackmore or Ingrid Malmsteen and something like that. What was the most difficult for you to explain your music around your passion for some band like this?
Well, no matter what, no matter how much I try, it's not going to come out sounding exactly like like Blackmore or like Rainbow. And plus, like myself, I'm much more of like I'm a metal player, so my approach is much more aggressive. So I'm going to take the sensibilities and the influence of of all of those classic iconic European guitar players, with primarily Blackmore, but I'm gonna put my own like aggressive, more metal spin on it, and the other thing is I've been listening to the Blackmore influence and the Rainbow Purple influence. I've been listening to that for like so many decades. It's like part of my DNA.
Mm.
So it's I think if you're it's not like that's just naturally who I am. So it's very natural for me to make this kind of music, and it's very honest. So so it's going to come out. It's going to come across authentic. It's much more of like an homage, and but with a new modern twist on it than it is like just plagiarizing like that stuff.
Voilà, bah oui, alors vous l'avez compris, Joey, c'est un grand fan de Rainbow, de Ritchie Blackmore, et voilà. La question, c'était comment on fait pour créer un album qui soit à cheval entre ce que Rainbow pouvait faire avec Ritchie Blackmore bientôt et puis ce qu'est le son de cet album. Voilà, le plus dur, effectivement, comme le dit, c'est de pouvoir faire quelque chose qui n'est pas un copie. Et comme le dit Joey très bien, c'est que il a ça dans le sang, c'est son DNA, comme il le dit. Ça fait partie de ses veines, de sa culture, et il essaye depuis très très longtemps, des décades, de mettre ces bons sons à travers les albums qui sortent. Joey, two questions before we ending. I have a chance to see John Lynn Turner a couple of days ago playing Death Alley. And I don't know why, but when I see Joey coming, I'm thinking about you.
Exactly. Well, if Joe Turner was smart, he would get me to play guitar for him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I would be perfect. You know?
Yeah. That was crazy because I see the guys coming on stage, and in meantime, I see you. I said, wow, it would be great to see both of us playing a lot of songs on a Rainbow, Purple, and so on. That was so fun, and I don't know why, but your face is coming in my mind right now when I see Joey playing. That was crazy.
Yeah, well, if you ever get a chance to talk to Joe Turner, tell him to get in touch with me. You know what I mean? Like I'd be perfect for him. But the other thing is, I think what Joe ends up doing most of the time is he just gets a band of like local musicians from wherever he's touring. Like if he's going to, maybe in Europe, he just gets a bunch of European guys, and then he does a run in Europe. Or if he does, Eastern Europe, or like Poland and the Czech and all that, he gets some dudes from over there. Or if he goes to South America, he gets a bunch of dudes from Brazil. You know what I mean? So he just gets like local guys, so to keep the cost down. That way he can, reap the rewards monetarily.
Yeah. Voilà, comme je vous disais, j'ai eu la chance de voir John Turner il n'y a pas longtemps. Et puis, j'ai pensé à Joey quand j'ai vu John monter sur scène sur Death Alley, tout ça. Voilà, comme il le dit, bah oui, John, il joue pas beaucoup, hein, il faut vraiment aller le voir. Il joue beaucoup en Bulgarie, voilà, en Slovénie, en Russie, un petit peu en Amérique du Sud, mais c'est vrai que ça serait compliqué de les voir. Mais j'aurais aimé les voir tous les deux. Joey, one last song before we ending. You coming back? Maybe we just opened the door of Alcatraz because you're coming back on tour again with the Girls School and Bangalore Shores at the end of the year. So it's good to know that you're coming back again in Europe.
Yes, yeah. Alcatraz European tour in November.
Yeah.
We have a surprise new record coming out.
Yeah.
It's it's like I'm not at liberty to talk about it. But because I don't know if you heard it or not. We re-released. We did a re-record of Island in the Sun.
Yeah.
And then there's another iconic old Alcatraz, and what are a bunch of these re-records? They're like kind of like a little interim album before we actually record the next studio album in 2026. But because Alcatraz, like it did make sense for us to do a whole new studio record this year, because you had Born Innocent in 2019, and then shortly after that, I think in 20. In 20 or 21, you had 5, and then you had Take No Prisoners just in 23, I believe. So we've recorded like 3 records since 2019. So there's going to be there's a new Alcatraz record coming out in the fall. Like a little interim kind of thing, but I'm not at liberty to discuss everything that's on there. But but I think, it's cool, and it's a fun record, and we'll probably be playing quite a bit of it, when we come to Europe.
Yeah, for sure. Voilà, donc les amis, il y a une tournée Alcatraz qui arrive avec Girls School et Bangalore Shore. Comme le dit Joey, il y a un nouvel album qui arrive bientôt. On en parlera bien sûr, parce que voilà, c'est toujours un plaisir de parler d'Alcatraz et de parler de Joey. Il y a une nouvelle version d'Isle in the Sun qui est disponible, que vous pouvez déjà écouter. En tout cas, on se fera un grand plaisir de réinviter Joey et le groupe Alcatraz, en espérant qu'ils viennent en France, parce qu'ils ne sont pas prévus. Joey, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. It's a great pleasure again to speak with you. It's a great pleasure to see you not alone in the desert.
Yeah, exactly. Like luckily today, outside here, it's not that hot. You know, last week it was extremely. Last week I was wearing only t-shirts because because it was like being well it was worse than being in the desert because it was quite humid outside.
Yeah.
At least the desert's a nice dry heat.
Thank you so much, Joey. Do you have some words for the French listener?
I just want to, say thank you, merci to all the French fans for, for supporting me, whether it's, in my solo career or Joe Stump's Tower of Babel or Alcatraz, and always great to be back in France. Looking forward to coming back this fall,
Thank you so much, Joey. See you very quickly in France and somewhere.
See you sooner than later. I know it's July now, but before we know it, you know what I mean. Like we'll be we'll be running into each other in France. That'll be great.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you so much, Joe.
Thanks a ton.
Bye bye. Bye bye.
Bye.